From time to time, the architect thinks to himself, something doesn't feel right. Sometimes I forget that being can feel different, and there are many ways to be. That is when he takes a day off and allows himself to be surprised, getting snapped into the middle of it all. Here, the world was at war with itself, carrying it over to passive onlookers like a plague. The surprises never stopped coming. Given a ship, sent on a trip, one way away to the grinder, his hands took on a mind of their own, steering towards the sun, full speed ahead, with the conviction of a young Icarus that never got burned, and his own colors on his tail. Got in so close that steam pressure snapped the pipes and electronics started failing, but eventually reached the other side. Mere minutes away before they find his wings, he rushes to Monkey Patch, just enough to get himself lost in uncharted space. Luckily, the tiny machine had enough juice left in order to allow the autopilot find another habitable planet. Too bad it had to crash. Kids these days can't fly for shit when fighting back 1G. Now he was a brand new explorer, and he named this world Escort, both as a joke and a metaphor for finding his own way in life. This was the starting point of a path that was hard to trail, hard to even comprehend without first-hand experience. To live in caves, to dwell in deserts, to eat maybe once a day or once a week, to wear the same clothes until they completely fall apart, and to rarely sleep, because being aware is more important than the comforts of the body. These types of deprivation made one thing blatantly obvious. That is, that there is no real suffering. At all. This is the last true rebellion, he says to himself. This is what the punks kept yapping about. This is how you become ungovernable. To take away the power that the world has over you by severing all chains that bind you to it. The ship and his identity both suffer the same fate. They were torn apart, decomposed and cannibalized to build his own machines, in his own image. One on the ground that harnessed power from a toxic river, one in the air that warned of weather changes and other strange cosmic events, one underground used to refine metallic ore, but most of it was used for his greatest work of art. A mechatronic sculpture in the form of a scorpion that he called the mirror, and that kept him sane whenever he wasn't training the body or stilling the mind. It was a work for the soul, in which he could immerse himself so fully that it almost bordered on a religious experience. After finally getting its bearings straight, accommodating with this new flavor of form and function, by learning how to crawl, climb, and run with a rider on its back, it taught itself how to replicate and to continuously improve. Soon enough, an entire swarm of smaller drones, built in its own image, took over the mountain, turning the runner's cave into an endless maze of tunnels, while covering ground outside for scavenging and securing the perimeter. All were driven by the same unilateral mind bestowed upon the mirror, communicating through the air, not with words but with experience. All instances sharing it in real time. The humans eventually took a leap into this corner of uncharted space and detected their missing ship. A few infantrymen descended into the labyrinth underneath and encountered the swarm, which they could only think of as a hostile alien species. But they were only half right. A large number of small drones interlocked their bodies, blocking the exits, while the much larger mirror flooded the caves with metal and fire. Eventually, the explorers decided to cut their losses short and blow up the swarm from orbit, ensuring that their wings could not fall into enemy hands. But upon the cover of nightfall, a single damaged drone comes out of its burrow, far away from where all the action took place, and heads straight for the rubble, now whispering only to itself that it was wise of the runner to make redundancy the name of the game. But anyway, that's all ancient history now. A lot of time has passed since, enough for intelligent species to emerge on this alien world. You see, some of the tribes in the vicinity worship the mountain like a god. It's a place where the water was always clear, and that somehow avoided all natural disasters. The natives created their own stories and rituals, bringing offerings with each change of season. The spirit that dwelled inside had no interest in such things, but understood this kind of behavior and let the natives evolve at their own pace. But on one night, one with both moons in the sky, the ground started to violently shake, as if a volcano was reaching its critical point and could erupt at any moment. The humans returned, and this time, in order to colonize. When they sent down their scouts around the native sacred ground, the closer they got, the less control they had over their instruments, and dropped right out of the sky, followed by thunderous metallic roars. They had no transport, communication, or defense, but humans can be persistent at times, and decided to complete their mission regardless, daringly getting closer using a land trail. When they finally reached the villages, a thick, silvery cloud of bots erupted from the mountain, slowly coming back down and settling like a metallic fog. It started eating the intruders from the inside out, while the natives watched in horror, unable to understand what they were actually witnessing. The mountaintop started to crumble, and large beams of light soared into the sky, followed by the image of the sun lighting up the dead of night, and a sky covered in shooting stars. The swarm remained unaware of their intent to colonize, and believed they were still tracking the core, which now served as the container for its mind. When the morning came, the mountain crumbled, splitting in half, while an enormous black metallic creature walked on the surface of the planet once again, heading towards an ocean nearby. Not the greatest launch pad, but the one with the least impact, and that didn't leave much trace. Realizing he had to leave this world behind in order to give life a chance of going a different route, was also realizing that there is nowhere else to go, and if there were, it wouldn't matter. So the first pit stop was back home, where the war was still ongoing. He leaves behind a piece of the runner's body floating in space, getting closer and closer to home. A skeleton hand with its middle finger up and the others coiled back. The mirror struggled to remember why it was doing this, or what it even meant, but it failed to recall. All that remained was the imprint of the fact that it did mean something once, and that it was important to the runner. From here on out, the sentient machine gets itself lost again. And this time, in the vast expanse of interstellar space, waiting for the inevitable low power warning, and micro-asteroids ripping the hull to shreds when the shields finally fail. So yeah, I guess it was just another one of those strange eons again, when the architect remembers what he wanted to forget.